Hello everyone, hope you're having a good day. Today the epidemic we'll be looking at is the 2014-2016 Ebola virus outbreak. This is a quick agenda of what we're going to go over today.
Let us begin. This epidemic is truly one of the most devastating public health crises in modern history and was the most devastating of the Ebola outbreaks since 1976. There was a rapid spread, severe impacts on nations, and it became clear that the public health response should have been better. So why wasn't it? What happened? And more importantly, what can we learn from this? As we move through today, I want you to come up with the answers to the question, why did so many unnecessary deaths occur? And we will return to this at the end. I also want to warn you that this presentation contains real images from the outbreaks, so do not continue watching if you're uncomfortable viewing this content.
Before we outline the story, we will start by looking at the epidemiological data. The virus that caused this outbreak was the Zaire strain of the Ebola, which is the most virulent and most contagious of all the Ebola viruses. The demographics that were affected included countries in West Africa, which were very low socioeconomic status. It affected women, children, and healthcare workers mostly because they were likely to become exposed. Finally, the public health measures eventually involved a large international response, but the response was far too delayed, and we will talk more about that in more detail later. You can see that the outbreak had a 50% fatality rate. Take a look at the numbers on the slide showing the reported cases and deaths, which occurred mostly in Guinea, Sierra Leone, and Liberia. However, the number of deaths is very likely to be much greater because only lab-confirmed cases were reported in the total number, and it does not account for deaths in homes or while waiting outside in hospitals like the image shown on the screen right now.
I don't like to call the events of this epidemic history because it was so recent and the effects of this outbreak still exist today and remain a part of the lives of thousands of individuals. The exact origins of this outbreak are not yet confirmed, but it's believed to have originated from the virus's natural reservoir, fruit bats, in Meliondo village, Guinea. It started in December 2013. There was a hollow tree in Meliondo where a group of young boys hunted bats, which they then consumed, and that's where the zoonotic spillover occurred. The first to fall sick was 2-year-old Emile Amano, who experienced fever, black stools, and vomiting. He unfortunately passed away 2 days later. A neighbor explained how when he went into the Amano household, there was blood everywhere due to the hemorrhaging, as family members also fell sick. However, at the time, communities believed that it was cholera again, which was endemic to the nation. The disease showed rapid progression with an average incubation period of 2 to 21 days and symptoms showing 6 to 10 days after the exposure. The mode of transmission was direct contact of bodily fluids. In Guinea, one of the main events that contributed to the spread was traditional burial rituals. Washers spent hours cleaning bodies, but the bodies were highly infectious. As this was going on, people were traveling from Guinea to Sierra Leone across borders that lacked immigration police, so it was easy. By March 2014, the virus was also in Liberia. After 2 horrific years, in March 2016, the end of the epidemic was declared, but this was only after it was recognized nationally as a concern.
The impacts this epidemic left on societies and civilizations is truly heartbreaking. Socially, this epidemic led to 11,000 children losing one or more parents. The image on the screen shows Finda Fala, a mother who spoke of her 3 children that passed away from Ebola while waiting outside of a hospital. In the streets, there was a lot of mistrust in the government, and people believed that Ebola was a conspiracy to kill poor Africans and felt that hospitals were making people more sick. Economically, these nations that were affected were already some of the poorest nations in the world, so this epidemic just further worsened their state. The crisis caused a total of $2.8 to $32.6 billion loss in GDP, and schools and businesses were forced to close, causing economic instability, job losses, and food insecurity. Culturally, there were many efforts to stop the spread. However, the community was very reluctant to change. People in Guinea believed that their traditional burial rituals must be done or else the deceased ghosts will return to haunt the living. Furthermore, many communities often relied on spiritual healing methods to cure people. For example, rubbing herbal medicine into a person's wound was a healing method which put the healer into direct contact with the bodily fluids of an infected person, further spreading the virus.
While attempting to contain the spread, it was clear that the virus was far too severe for the systems in place. The image shows Kenema Hospital in Sierra Leone. With thousands of cases, that is what existed to help the people. Nurses became sick, and that's why people thought the hospitals were set up to kill them. Look at these images. There are dead bodies in the hospital beds. Doctors would often have to dismiss them and continue working on other patients. Thousands of people were also outside the hospital waiting and were refused to let in. So with the chaos, grievance, and disbeliefs, riots started, and the streets became crowded with individuals. So what do you think happened as a result of this? You might be internally criticizing these people for their beliefs and actions, but this existed in a region where they didn't know any better.
We will now move on to the saddest part of this epidemic, the public health response. One of the most significant issues was the lack of national effort. The World Health Organization failed to respond effectively, which delayed actions to send support to these communities. An organization called Doctors Without Borders witnessed the catastrophes at first hand, and they urged the World Health Organization to declare a national emergency, but they still refused. The World Health Organization thought it would be a good idea to leave the response in the hands of the officials in Guinea, but they had no experience with Ebola and did not know how to tackle it. Doctors Without Borders held daily meetings with the government of Guinea in hopes to control the spread, but they were unsuccessful, and Mark Ponson, a member of the organization, described it as a total nightmare. There were attempts also to reach out to American Metabiota, but they were far too small of a company and also had no experience with Ebola. Only 225 days after the first index case did the World Health Organization finally make the declaration, but this was way far too delayed.
We will now compare this epidemic to a polio epidemic that was also in 2014. The diagram outlines some of the key differences between polio and Ebola. As you can see, the outbreaks both involved community resistance, but polio was far more under control. This can be explained by polio being less virulent, but the World Health Organization quickly declared polio a national emergency in the first couple of months, despite it being known to be much less fatal than Ebola. So why was there such a difference? Well, polio spread to developed nations. To answer the question earlier, why did so many unnecessary deaths occur? Yes, it was highly contagious. Yes, high fatality rate. But primarily, the countries affected by Ebola were poor African countries. The truth is, they were seen as less of a priority nationally.
So what can we learn? Lessons for future public health efforts include the need for better preparedness in vulnerable regions, the need to be more emphasis on the treatment for such outbreaks in these underdeveloped nations, and also more investing needs to be done to improve the healthcare system in these nations to have enough staff so there's no burnout, and to have essential equipment like vaccine and protective gear.
In conclusion, the biggest issue in this epidemic was the failure to recognize how serious it was, so let us not do the same. Here are some of the names of individuals who lost their lives to Ebola: doctors, civilians, and families. Let us never forget all those who died and all those who are still impacted today. Thank you. For a closer look at the story, I recommend watching this documentary. Here is the reference list.